The says the principal biochemical defect that leads to the development of hemoglobin involves the completion of that the sickle polypeptide chain. The next does the disease of crisis resulting from the removal of blood by way of the reticular system is the last question. Transfusion needed in so after the presentation, we'll come back to answer this question. So as you can see, this is all what I'm to present on sickle cell anemia, seeing abnormal red blood cell shape. So we'll follow this outline. We'll start with the introduction. We'll go to the epidemiology. We'll talk a little bit about hemoglobin, talk about the genetics of the sickle cell anemia. We'll talk about the pathophysiology, clinical presentation, diagnosis, management, complication, prevention, and a summary. So what's sickle cell anemia? Sickle cell anemia, or also known as sickle cell hemoglobin SS disease, is an autosomal recessive genetic disorder resulting from an inherited abnormal hemoglobin gene from both parents. So it's a congenital malformation because you're born with a disease, and it is autosomal recessive. So you need two genes from one from both parents to exhibit the disease. Also, we have another definition, which is a sickle cell disease. The sickle cell disease is not also called sickle cell anemia. There are two different things. One constitutes the other. Sickle cell disease is a variant, and sickle cell disease and its variants are genetic disorders resulting from the presence of a mutated form of hemoglobin S. So sickle cell disease is a whole class on its own, and sickle cell anemia is a part of sickle cell disease. We'll see the other forms of sickle cell disease. And we should know that the most common and severe form of sickle cell disease is sickle cell anemia. Also, we have sickle cell trait, which is a heterozygous form of the sickle cell anemia. Heterozygous meaning one gene received from the parents is abnormal and the other one is normal. So sickle cell disease has other genotypes. As you can see, we have the heterozygous for the hemoglobin, which is S, associated with a thalassemia. So you see HBS similar to sickle cell anemia, which are all forms of sickle cell disease, but you not easily differentiate them. But you know that sickle cell anemia is a severe form of this and is the most common. So if a patient comes and you're suspecting, you always have to think of sickle cell anemia first because of its prevalence, and also from a sickle cell disease with beta thalassemia plus. This one is milder and is less severe as compared to the sickle cell anemia. We also have a heterozygous form of sickle cell hemoglobin S and also hemoglobin C. These ones also are common, but not as common as sickle cell anemia. And the other ones are rare. We don't really see them often, and also they have mild to moderate symptoms. So sickle cell disease is prevalent. It has a high burden in areas such as sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Mediterranean. And in the world, the annual birth of people that are born with sickle cell, 80% of the 300,000 comes from sub-Saharan Africa, with the greatest proportion in the countries Nigeria and Democratic Republic of Congo. And in West African countries, still when Nigeria is found, we have 1 in 4 persons have the sickle cell trait. Sickle cell disease is found in areas of high malaria prevalence, that's in sub-Saharan Africa. And realize that those are the carriers. That's if you have one abnormal gene of the sickle cell and a normal gene of the hemoglobin, you are you have a kind of advantage, as in confer an immunity. Who have the two abnormal genes are more susceptible to having malaria. So that's the study carried out. Still, there's no really explanation that could really elaborate why this is happening. So as concerns hemoglobin, another hemoglobin is a protein found in red blood cells that gives the red blood cells a color, and as well as take away carbon dioxide. So hemoglobin has a tetramer. It has 4 globin chains, 2 of which are alpha and beta. Realize that they are not just alpha and beta. We have other ones depending on the age, as is it in a newborn, fetus, or an adult. So we have measure for normal adult hemoglobin. We have the hemoglobin A. We also have the hemoglobin F, which have 2 alpha and 2 gamma. And hemoglobin F is found in units. Its proportion is higher in the units and also in the fetus. We also have the hemoglobin A2, which is made up of 2 alpha chains and 2 delta chains. And each hemoglobin is being enclosed in a hem of a porphyrin ring and iron, which is in the ferrous state. That's +2. And this property makes hemoglobin to be able to carry one hemoglobin molecule to be able to transfer 4 oxygen molecules to cells. So as we can see, the normal hemoglobin from this table, a normal hemoglobin, and from the fetal hemoglobin, realize that you have the gamma and you have the alpha chain and the gamma chain. So you have in units totally units don't have fetal hemoglobin, as they don't have completely the F hemoglobin. They also have part of the hemoglobin, which is the adult hemoglobin, that's hemoglobin H. All the hemoglobin of the fetus, which is the one which has the alpha and the gamma chain. You also have a bit which it has a proportion which has the hemoglobin of the adult. We also have the other percentages of the different hemoglobin, both in units and in adult. So this is the hemoglobin molecule with all its other. How does sickle cell anemia come about? Realize that it is a point mutation and it happens on the chromosome 11, where valine replaces glutamic acid on the C position of the beta chain. And when this happens, it forms a hemoglobin known as hemoglobin S. And if both parents are sicklers, have the sickle cell trait, as if and the other one has the hemoglobin A and S, and they have a child, there will be a 25% chance that the child will have the disease. But if you have a parent if you have parents in which one has the disease already and the other one has the trait, which is the heterozygous form AS, so that there's an of their child will have the disease, as we can see from this illustrated diagram. If both parents have the disease, obviously all the children will have the disease. But if they are the carriers of the disease, 25% will have the disease, 25%, 50% will be carriers, and 25%. So what happens? What's the mechanism of this sickle cell anemia? What makes it come about? How does it really come about, the sickle cell anemia? We realize that with the sickle, already there's a defective hemoglobin, but it doesn't mean that if in a comfortable environment, the hemoglobin, you will not notice anything. But you have decreased oxygen, such as in high altitudes. We realize that these cells will undergo polymerization. That's the hemoglobin will undergo polymerization and they'll cluster to each other. And when they cluster to each other, they will form a gel-like solid substance. Normally, hemoglobin is supposed to be liquid and it's soluble. When this sickle cell tension, they tend to cluster to each other and they'll polymerize. And this continuous polymerization will attach themselves will cleave to the red blood cell membrane and deform the membrane and form now the sickle cell shape of the disease. And we realize that there's a kind of equilibrium with this formation of the polymerized gel substance, and also if this oxygen tension is kind of reduced. If it is not so severe that there is so decrease in oxygen, there will be that equilibrium, as in the sickler will not exhibit any symptoms at that moment. But there are other factors that will influence the hemoglobin, they include oxygen tension. So in a case where the oxygen tension is really like there's low oxygen, there's hypoxia, it will promote more sickling of the cells. Also, if you have a concentration more of HbS hemoglobin, which is the formation of more gel-like substance, that's the more insoluble substance of the hemoglobin. And you realize that in this case, you compare it with those with the sickle cell trait and those who have the sickle cell anemia. Those with the sickle cell trait have both in the normal hemoglobin and the abnormal hemoglobin. So the sickling will not be so severe, and that's why they end up not having. In fact, most of the hemoglobin is the S hemoglobin, and some which you have the fetal hemoglobin. And so there is continuous or the severe sickling just because the concentration of the hemoglobin is defective. And also you have, if there are presence of other hemoglobin, if there's a presence of hemoglobin C and hemoglobin S, it will not be as this, it will be a severe case as compared to hemoglobin HC and HCHS combined. So the part of after when these red blood cells are being sickled, the membrane, there's already destabilization of the membrane, and so the ATPase pump is being affected. And since calcium depends on the ATPase pump, it is also impaired, and so calcium moves in. Calcium moving in makes the cell rigid, and so they are not flexible to flow in micro vessels, in smaller vessels, and this will lead to an obstruction, and hence there will be decreased blood supply to that area, and leading to infection and necrosis. Mechanism in which these red blood cells associated with the neutrophils and also the platelets have a high probability of adhering to the endothelium. So if they adhere to the endothelium, they'll reduce the lumen of the endothelium, and if they're adhering, there'll be aggregates, and they'll cause an obstruction, and so there'll be decreased blood supply to that area of the tissue, and it will lead to an ischemia, leading to an infection. And also during this, the sicklers are also, during their crisis, realize that there's also a decrease of nitric oxide. And nitric oxide, since it's a vasodilator, if there's a decrease, and so the vessels will be narrowed and will cause obstruction, leading to infection and ischemia. So as you can see, we have the abnormal hemoglobin, we have the normal hemoglobin, and also when there is agglutination or aggregation of the sickled hemoglobin, is an obstruction, and so the area where the blood is supposed to supply will be impaired. So as clinical presentation, since from birth, the hemoglobin which is dominant is the fetal hemoglobin, we just have a small amount of the adult hemoglobin. The symptoms, and they are asymptomatic. That's right up to 6 months from birth, they are symptomatic due to the predominance of symptoms which will start showing. And they could be divided as the acute symptoms as well as the chronic symptoms. As acute symptoms, you have the vaso-occlusive crisis, which is the most common clinical presentation. Like every hospitalization of a sickler, before you want to think of anything, you realize that it's because of, and this vaso-occlusive crisis is just due to a polymerization of the abnormal hemoglobin, which will obstruct the pathway, which will obstruct the micro vessels, the smaller vessels, leading to a decreased supply of oxygen, and the ischemia and cell death and pain, and the pain there is. And so this will lead to organ damage, because it happens, all organs are being supplied, or you realize that all organs have blood vessels which supply them. And so if this occurs in all organs of the body, you realize that all organs are being affected, and it happens to all organs of the body where there is infection. And as a clinical presentation, we still falls under vaso-occlusive crisis. We have the dactylitis, also known as hand-foot syndrome. It is an early manifestation of the crisis, and also it's a painful swelling of the hands or feet, earliest presentation of sickle cell. So it's as a result of the vaso-occlusive crisis. So most of the time you see children coming after 6 months and you have pains or what, you should think of sickle cell crisis. You should think of it, and that's the need. You should think of, you have any investigations. Also, you have the bone pain. In this case, since the bone it also has blood vessels, and due to the vaso-occlusive crisis, there's obstruction, and so blood does not reach the bone, and there's bone marrow infarction. You also have the acute chest syndrome, which is almost similar to it. You cannot really clearly differentiate it from pneumonia. So in the case the patient comes in hypoxia, you should be thinking that there's a need, and with dyspnea, there's a need to do an investigation, especially the person, the status, if in a young child, if yet the status, the hemoglobin status is unknown, you should also request for a test, because it cannot really distinguish it. We also have the stroke. With these other presentations, they occur in smaller blood vessels, but with stroke, it occurs in larger blood vessels, and so it is life-threatening. Occlusive crisis really has no cause on its own. Like there's no cause which has been researched yet, but there are triggering factors such as infections, we have dehydration, we have acidosis, change in body temperature, stress, and pregnancy. The one which is always common is with the dehydration, because almost every trend, body temperature could lead to dehydration. That's fever could cause perspiration, which could lead to dehydration. Probably they might be having an infection in which they are vomiting or having diarrhea, which could lead to dehydration, as well as pregnancy, which is always, it's a medical condition on its own, sickle cell crisis. That's why those who are sicklers and who get pregnant had higher rates of mortality and morbidity, and so should be followed up frequently. As another crisis, we have the sequestration crisis, and this crisis usually occur within. This crisis comes about when a large pool of blood um, is being concentrated in the spleen, and so if a large pool of blood is being concentrated in the spleen, so there is a decrease in intravascular volume, and this will lead to shock because more blood is concentrated to the spleen, and there's decreased blood supply to volemic shock. And since the spleen is an organ which try to um, engulf and destroy abnormal red blood cells, sickling red blood cells, when the spleen overworks, it will lead to inflammation and also it will be enlarged. And so it will not be able to do its function in engulfing more sickling red blood cells, and as well as its action. So this will have a consequence on the individual. It is life-threatening because it's first of all hypovolemia and this massive destruction of red blood cells, which will also lead to anemia. And so with time, if these symptoms will occur and it prolongs, there'll be continuous transfusion. And if it continues to move, because if the spleen is there, there'll be an increase in engulfment and destruction of red blood cells, aggravating the crisis, and which is life-threatening. We also have the aplastic crisis, which is commonly due to the infection, the parvovirus B19. And this infection, this virus affects the progenitor of the erythroblast, that's right at the bone marrow, which affects the production of red blood cells. And realize that red blood cells have sickle red blood cells have a shorter lifespan, that's 10 to 20 days, as opposed to normal red blood cell, which has a red blood cell in normal adult, which has a lifespan of virus is disrupting the red blood cells, the precursors of the red blood cells in the bone marrow, and the periphery, the spleen continuously destroys red blood cells. You realize that there'll be an acute state of anemia, a severe acute state of anemia, which has to be ameliorated as soon as possible. So, and also with time, it is a self-limiting process since it's a virus infection, and so the infection will limit itself, and with time, the bone marrow will regain its function, and realize that the bone marrow will produce red blood cells. Reason why you will see after 7 to 10 days, you see an increase in reticulocyte counts, which is an acute drop in the hemoglobin level caused by massive destruction of red blood cells. And it is associated with the disease known as glucose 6 dehydrogenase, glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency. So in a case the person comes in is sick, suspecting it's a sickler count very low, that's less than 6, because the normal hemoglobin level of a sickler is 6 to 7. Whereas that is very low. The kind of symptoms showing for it, already having fatigue, dyspnea, jaundice. You should think of this other associated disease, which is an enzyme defective disease. And also you have to look further for what has precipitated the onset of this hemolytic crisis. We also have as acute symptoms infection. There's infection, there's occlusion of the micro blood vessels, and this infection. The spleen is not exempted from it, so the spleen is also affected, though it has its function to capture and destroy abnormal red blood cells. It needs to be well nourished to do that function. And so if there's enough nutrient, and so it will reduce in size as time goes, as about 5 years of age and above, it will decrease in size, and so it cannot do its function, it will not function well in its immunity, and it predisposes the individual to encapsulated organisms such as streptococcus and salmonella. We also have chronic presentations such as a chronic hemolytic anemia, in which they realize that they have symptoms which are not really pronounced. They have fatigue, weakness, pallor, jaundice, and they are comfortable in that situation. They are fine. They are tolerating it. It only happens probably in a case where they undergo probably a vigor cause them to have an acute hemolytic anemia. That's when you see them presenting in a decompensated state, in a state which they cannot tolerate again. We also have chronic pain. In this case, they have continuous pain due to the infection. So it is a pain which it is exhibited like in the vaso-occlusive crisis, where the pain is reduced as opposed to that. They can also have pigmented stones. This occurs when there is constant hemolysis. So there's increase in level of the bilirubin, especially the unconjugated bilirubin. When it is concentrated, it aggregates and forms bile stone, which obstruct the bile duct, the hepatic duct, as well as the gallbladder, and it could further lead to inflammation of the gallbladder and problems with the liver as well as the bile duct. In a sickler, you have clinical presentations which are also chronic, but you always find them in a sickler. You can see a sickler just looking